Well, we're inside the Beltway again with Star Parker. I'm Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk, and just welcoming you again to another opportunity to listen to ideas, to share ideas, and to see if we can make some sense out of the public policy in the public square here in Washington, D.C. You know, we have a national crisis in character, and that's what I want to talk about today. And the reason that I want to talk about the national crises in character today is because we are in a share-a-thon opportunity this week with American Family Radio. American Family Radio is like the syndication for Urban Family Talk. And Urban Family Talk is a new concept, actually. It's where many of us in the urban family are saying we should have a place that we can have dialogue with the 30% of Black conservatives who keep telling pollsters that they're evangelical. They keep telling pollsters that they're conservative. They keep telling the pollsters that they believe in God and they have a biblical worldview. What we have found, especially those of us that work in the political arena, is that that particular group doesn't have its own separate voice outside of the liberal Black community that seems to demand more and more government for every single problem confronting the urban centers, the urban cores in our country. And what we've seen over the last 50 years is situations get worse for the people that live in our most impoverished and vulnerable communities simply because the government has taken over these communities. They have what we call the tragedy of the commons, that nobody owns it, so nobody takes care of it. We've had, in particular, the Black family move from 70% with married parents raising children to today's over 70% of single parent raising children. And so there's really a crisis because all the pathologies that come out of this particular situation where family life is totally collapsed, pathologies like low educational aspirations, more out-of-wedlock birth, confusion, and just despair, where people then let their lives spiral out of control. They don't even take up ownership in their own lives, thinking that perhaps somebody else can do this for me because they've been told that. So the people of Urban Family Talks at Star, why don't you join with us? Join our family. Let's talk every single day to people that don't necessarily get to hear the other side of the story because their communities are controlled by the major media, the mainstream media, and their liberal voices that are their politicians and or the mainstream media are not articulating the biblical worldview. So I said, this sounds really good, and it fits into our programs here at CURE because the Center for Urban Renewal and Education, the organization that I founded some 15 years ago, we focus on these same ideas of traditional values, limited government, free markets, strong national allegiance and defense, and thought, we should have a place that we can talk to and be a voice for those that don't get full information. They know the scripture and they know what God has said, but they haven't been able to connect it to why their communities are still in despair and what has happened in public policy and public and in the public square. So I thought this will be a good opportunity for us. Let's do it. Let's do Inside the Beltway with Star Parker. And so it's a wonderful time for us to give insight and information. And our syndication, American Family Radio, is nonprofit. They raise money to help keep us on the air, if you will. Over 300 stations, I believe, all across the country. It's just amazing, amazing work that is being done at American Family Radio. So I said, I'm going to dedicate this time to their effort to make sure that you can participate through your giving, the free will giving, to make sure that we can keep Christian ministry on the airways. And it's one major reason for that is because our national crises in character. We've got to have space where we can talk about what is really tearing our nation apart. I'm going to give you their telephone number, so if you care to participate, it's 888-779-1122. And someone will help you there to know what the next step will be, 888-779-1122. The reason that this fits in really well with what I wanted to discuss with you today is because I have a letter. It's just a part of a letter I'm going to read to you that I received after the elections from a college professor. And in the letter it said, throughout the election, I discussed with students the difference between the ideologies. The majority of them are on federal financial aid. They're fine with more taxes as long as they will be taken care of. He's a college professor. He said, it is disturbing to hear that they are willing to spend their own money on tattoos and cell phones, but cannot buy the books for class until the financial aid comes in. You know, those who see social conservatism as an annoyance, and they'll even argue for the one political party, Republicans, that they need to purge this agenda from their party platform to survive. I say, you know, we ought to think again. Because if we as a nation are going to survive, and certainly if the opposition party to liberalism is going to survive, then they need revival. They need an honest and focused discussion, excuse me, about what's really wrong in America and what we need to do to ensure that America is a great nation that will be standing for our children, for our grandchildren, for our great-grandchildren. You know, we have to, at some point, say that something other than financial matters matter. You know, we keep getting hit, we keep getting reminders throughout our culture today that there's good and evil. We keep seeing evil, but there's very little space for us to talk about the good. And that's why I really appreciate what's happening, not just with American Family Radio, but with this new idea of an urban family talk. Because we don't get enough energy coming from ideas that are in the scripture, that are sound, that say character matters. You know, we keep hearing about the focus groups. They seem what we should be thinking about how this no redistribution should be working throughout all of our lives. The redistribution of wealth, as I've mentioned to you before, I believe is inconsistent with the scripture. The 10th commandment says don't covet. And redistribution of wealth, socialism, it's rooted in covetousness. Somebody has something somebody else doesn't have, so we go hire politicians to take it from them. And then the next thing you know, we have a whole nation dependent on government. Well, leadership is about identifying the truth, believing it, and telling in a way that people can grasp it. Then they will respond and follow. And that's what happens on American Family Radio as well as on Urban Family Talk. All of us are dedicated to say we are going to identify the truth. We believe it. And then we're going to tell it in a way that people can grasp. So you can tell your friends, I know a place where you can go and hear an opposition opinion from the prevailing thought that comes out of media. We have some really great radio hosts across this country in the secular environment. Many of them are my personal friends. Wonderful radio hosts. In fact, I'm on their shows all the time. I dedicate Tuesdays to do radio. And for the last, I would say 3 or 4 years, I'm doing Tuesday Radio Day. And I can be on up to 5 different stations every Tuesday because we have over 3,000 radio hosts in the country now. I do a couple of hundred radio interviews a year. I mean, it's just like dedicated, sit down. I'm all over the country. I'm in this little town over there. I'm in that little town over there. I'm in that whole state over there because these hosts are building their audiences in their own arenas. And then I sit on the phone and talk to that community. And I love it. I absolutely love the opportunity to do the political discourse as a nationally syndicated columnist with Scripps News Service. I'm always into the news anyway. I think that God has given me a perspective about the news that can be shared, is shared, and people appreciate me sharing it. So radio is a natural fit to go on and then interview as the president of CURE and addressing poverty issues, race matters, welfare reform, entitlement reform, education, jobs, the economy, different ideas and different topics that are in the headlines. And I love it. I love them. I love my friends that are in the secular. But I also understand the very unique role of American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. And that's why I'm just so honored to be a part of it and to be able to bring, from a Christian perspective, dialogue and information about the headlines. And that's what my show's dedicated to. Now, everybody on Urban Family Talk won't be so opinionated on the political, if you will. And we have Bishop Harry Jackson, who is a pastor. So he has a pastor's heart when he talks on Urban Family Talk of the relevant issues of today. We have many others that have discussion about family life and how to build healthy marriage and healthy family, because these are issues that need serious discussion in urban America today, especially in the Black community. I mean, Blacks bought the lie and the agenda of liberals some 40 years ago that they could take care of them. They bought this whole idea of the great society that somebody else can take care of you. And it collapsed their family and kept their communities in ruin. And now there's no economic stability in any hard-hit urban center in our country. And then when some get so bad, like what's happened up in Detroit, that they need management, new management to come in. I mean, their mayor's going to jail. There's just such corruption in leadership. And the people are living in total despair. They complain from the left. No, we don't want a manager. You're just white folks trying to take over our communities. They pump this idea out into the people. You know, I did a debate the other day, the great debate, they call it. And Al Sharpton was one of the debaters, and Julianne Malveaux, and it was me and Niger on the other side. And, you know, I'm having to scream in to get attention. They told us that they were going to have a particular format, an organized format. They sent it out to us. They told us to prepare a couple of minutes on each of these topics, and you will get 1.5 minutes to rebut. And it was going to be totally organized environment. And 5 minutes before we go out, the moderator comes in and specifically tells me, while Niger is there, I'm not doing that format. We're taking the gloves off and we're having a fight. Fine. I used to be a street fighter. But then every time I tried to street fight, they got upset. This world is corrupted by liberalism, by secular humanism. So we have to have space on the other side, those of us that say we have a biblical worldview, to say, well, where do we get to talk? Where do we get to share? Where do we get to get our full ideas into the public? And I think that American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk is one of those opportunities. So I hope that you will share with them so that we can continue this great work. And you can share with them by calling 888-779-1122. And it's hard to share when you have little. The economy has been totally collapsed. There are families that are struggling, good, solid Christian families, that are now finding themselves humbly before their church when they pass out the feeding boxes. I've been in church recently where they were saying from the pulpit, please, we're going to pass a special offering because we have families that are tremendously suffering right now. Oh, I have personal friends that got hit hard, lost their homes. It's a very difficult time. But I can remind you, though, the scripture says, give, and it shall be given unto you. Sometimes when you have the least, it's time to really pay your tithe, to really give your offering, because God shines through when we do that. And leadership is about identifying the truth, and that's what we're trying to do here. Believe it, so that we can tell it in a way that people understand it, so they can respond and they can follow. The professor's letter provides a snapshot, just a hint, of what America's most basic problem is today. It is a problem of character and values. And after having lectured on more than 180 college campuses over the last 20 years, I have seen up close and personal exactly what the professor is talking about. Of course, government's too big, but how did it get this way? Americans vote every 2 years. They voted every 2 years during the whole period over which government grew to its current size. And with the majority of the country now in some kind of government program or another, does anyone really think we can change this without talking about the human attitudes and values that produce this country we live in today? Star Parker inside the Beltway here. You can tweet me at Star Parker. You can Facebook me at Star Parker for Freedom. Visit urbancure.org and help American Family Radio by calling 888-779-1122. I'll be right back. You're inside the Beltway with Star Parker. Welcome. And of course, today is another day that we have an opportunity to look at public policy, look at the areas where our lives touch in public space. And for anyone who doesn't think it matters what happens inside the Beltway here in Washington, D.C., you have to think about the scripture and compare what's happening here and what's happening out there and say, if the foundations are destroyed, what will the righteous do? Well, the righteous are starting to complain and wonder and pray for the rapture. And and live in fear. It's hard. Everyone's fighting fear now because things have gotten really dark. And then we're not forgetting to say, well, how did it get here? How did it get so dark? Well, it got dark because we ignored the public space. We ignored where our lives touch through law, through public policy. And when you have evil people in charge of making laws, secular humanists in charge of making laws, then you end up with a environment that anything goes. And you have to shout into that environment with some insight and wisdom, and then you get knocked back. I mean, we really shout in, and that's why I so much like American Family Radio and being our syndicate for Urban Family Talk, so that we can start spreading an alternative message all across this country, especially when it comes to the minority interest in this country, that minority Christian interest. Anyone can come along with us and share with us, and I hope that you do here on Urban Family Talk, but there's a particular group that we're targeting. Those 30% of evangelical Christians that say, we need our own voice. We need our own place that we can get insight and information. Because our representatives are not cool. And frankly, when you think about the Republican Party, the opposition party, they don't even run people in these districts because they figure, well, all blacks are the same. All Mexicans are the same. They don't want us at all. And then they have all those Bible-believing blacks and Mexicans that are saying, what about us? I remember when I was recruited a few years ago to run for office, I moved into a district I didn't live in to see if we could just try to bring some awareness to the breakdown, the national crisis in character, the national crisis public policy. And I remember meeting a woman at one of the churches where I spoke. And she said, I came here just to see you because after they had their primary there, she said, I cried to the Lord. I said, that's it? We end up with this woman who we know is secular and humanist and corrupted. Of course, she didn't know that there was someone else running because the primaries, you vote only in your party. They since then in California changed that now top two vote getters go to the general election. But that time, you had a Democrat and a Republican. And so they had their Democrat primary, and I ran as a Republican, and I didn't have a primary challenger. So after the primaries were over, she thought the Lord had abandoned her, that they just ended up with this corrupt congresswoman who should have been in jail and actually has had ethics charges against her. She's now not in the Congress. And with some of the charges, if we even had good leadership in the Attorney General's office, should be looking into Congress people like this, because she could do for the crimes that she committed up to 10 years, but I doubt they will pursue her. And when she turned 65, she actually served long enough, 5 years, to be fully vested. She'll get her full pension. Taxpayers will pay the rest of her life, even though she was a very corrupt congresswoman. But this young woman was a Christian woman who said, I don't want that. I need alternative. And I then, at that particular point, was that alternative voice. And that's what we're building on Urban Family Talk, is a place for that woman to hear her perspectives, her ideas, what she believes in Scripture come to life, and then know how it touches these other areas. Big government, for one. Government did not get big overnight. Democrats have a much easier problem than Republicans. They're not trying to change America. The trends and attitudes that got the whole country on welfare, that produced the moral relativism that is now destroying families and character, is the platform of the Democrat Party. They promote it. They are in love with it. The only thing that they have to do, a Democrat politician today, is just deny the patient sick. But Republicans, if they're going to be the real opposition party, they've got a much tougher job. But with all the talk in the last election being driven by demographics and turnout and everything we're hearing is, this is the reason. The most basic point is the party and its candidate did not step up as a serious principled opposition party. They can place blame anywhere they want to say, well, no, it's because of those religious rights. They just keep wanting to focus on abortion. Well, somebody should focus on abortion, especially with what we're pushing up to the headlines now. Our director of outreach and education was telling me here yesterday that that Gosnell story, this horrible, deplorable situation where he was murdering babies. He aborted thousands of babies, and some were born alive, and he just killed them. He was telling me that now it's bubbling up so well on the internet. The mainstream media cannot ignore this story anymore. Well, that story broke before the election. I was trying to talk about it then. Speech to speech, little interview to interview, soundbite to soundbite. And now we have Urban Family Talk, where we can push out the whole story. And you'll know news that the media in the mainstream, the secular, I'm not going to call them mainstream because we're mainstream. We have airways too. And with your help, we can get it out really wide. And American Family Radio is our syndication. So if you help, we can get this out, and we are mainstream because anyone can just go on any dial and they'll hear us. Anyone can go on their internet and they will hear us. And we need that because the secular media is not going to report every story. And the stories that matter most, this crisis in character, they're not going to report. They're complicit. They're a part of it. And it seems the Republicans need somebody pushing them. And the people pushing them are the Nathans in our society that will go to the king and tell him a story. And the story is about the king and his own sin. We have to start embracing who we are as Christian people. And we have to embrace all of the Bible. And there are times that God needed his people to stand up and speak. And right now, I think that we have an opportunity in our own country to stand up and speak. The social issues, the religious liberty issues, homosexuality. If the foundation is destroyed, what are we going to do? You know, we can't save Medicare and Social Security. You keep hearing that we're just going to, they're bankrupt. And they're bankrupt because they're built on a flawed foundation. Both. Current workers paying for current retirees is Social Security. It's a Ponzi scheme. If it were a business in our country, it would be illegal to conduct. And yet somehow we look at the scripture and say, where God tells us what to do with widows and how to care for them. The families care for their elderly, and tithes and offerings care for the families that can't make it on their own. But somehow we've convinced ourselves that no, this one size fits all. Let the government care about that because I don't want to think about it. And we get to the point now where, you know, for every 3 workers, they're taking care of a elderly person in our society, and politicians are tapping their foot wondering, when are these people going to die? They're living too long. How are we going to change the system so that we can have more die before they recover the money that we forced out of their check? Because that's what it is. Current workers are paying for current retirees, and the pyramid has turned upside down. My grandmama had 9. My mama had 5, and I had 2, and lost one of them. And that happened all over this country. We convinced ourselves that children are environmental hazards. They're not gifts from God. They're problematic. They're expensive. And too many people ruin the environment. So our perfect little families now are one of 2. One little boy and one little girl. And you should be finished. I was sharing with somebody the other day that my grandson's pushing his mom and dad. Oh, I want more little brothers and sisters because he has his new little sister now. And they're considering, and I was mentioning someone, they're like, oh, what are your grandchildren? I said, I have a little boy and a little girl grandchildren. Oh, well, that's enough. You got one of, no, it's not enough. It's not enough till God says it's enough. And yet we bought this ourselves as Christians. And we have very few places where we can go and hear consistent diet of information on the scriptures and what we're talking about in the headlines when it comes to public policy. Social Security is not going to work. Having little bitty baby families and letting somebody manage that for us and try to build out some perfect world and some perfect environment is not going to happen. Medicare is not going to work. You can't say we'll just pay for everything by taking out a little bit of your check over your working life and not add any dimension of responsibility on that. Nope, just goes bankrupt. We can't save our public schools. They're controlled by unions. Their agenda is growing. Their benefits are, and they're promoting moral relativism among our youth. I mean, my goodness, I talked to you last week about how in California they passed a law to teach gay history. That's what politicians do. And the churches call, oh, what happened? How I don't know what to do next. Well, I've been telling you for 25 years, open a school and start preaching the full gospel from your pulpit so that we can get people that are called to be in public service, that understand the scripture, and they take those values to Sacramento in that case, in California case, or to Washington, D.C., so that we have legislators who understand that they should not pass a law to teach gay history in the classrooms. I would be afraid to do that. And we need politicians who are more afraid of God than they are of the voters. We're not going to fix these public schools. It's over. Never should have been. The scripture says, train up a child in the way he should go, so that his old won't depart from those values. And yet we turn them over to a government that convinced us that they can build out a utopian world in education, a one-size-fits-all. We then started looking at private school as, an elite environment. That's for the special. No, private schools are schools where we should have morality taught. Parents should be able to decide where they send their children to school. The public schools are now destroying our children. They're destroying our future. You want to know how public opinion shifted to where now it's acceptable with our youth to be in homosexual, same-sex relationships, to where now they're pushing our society and our politicians to reject the very law they passed years ago called DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, to where we defined marriage on a national level. People say, well, it doesn't matter. This is a state issue. It's not a state issue if it's Social Security and Medicare are involved. These homosexual activists have made it clear that they're after benefits. This discussion is not even about marriage. It's about religion. It's about marginalizing religion. They know that if you have a conflict in society, in the cultural war between what God said, they want to do what God said don't do. And if we as a society say that's okay, do what God said don't do, then it marginalizes God. It diminishes the Bible to just theory, a footnote. You can believe it if you want to, but please don't bring it out into the public square. That's where we're moving. So we have to have an environment where we can talk about these things. When Ronald Reagan was elected in November 1980, 18% of babies were born to unwed mothers. Today, 43% are. So anyone that thinks this is not a crisis of first order wouldn't know what to do with their vote. They could hear from one politician, that sounds good. They hear a little soundbite from that one, that sounds good. Anyone that gets all of their news from what ABC, NBC, CBS says because they just happen to turn on the evening news to hear what the weather's going to be the next day so that they can be dressed appropriately while they're making dinner, that's not enough news. We have to develop our own news sources that are outside of the secular. Not taken away from the secular hosts. I mentioned them, and many of them are my friends. But those that have a biblical worldview need a particular focus on that worldview in their news. And we need a place that we can constantly grow and learn, get understanding. And we're carving that out with American Family Radio, who's syndicated now Urban Family Talk. An opportunity for us to specifically look at the breakdown, and especially when it comes to the breakdown in family. Because if we really think life can work without whole families, you'd be kidding. We can look at any and every inner city in this country and see life won't work without whole and healthy families. In the black community, they were so vulnerable during the 60s when they started all this social engineering that they bought that lie. Oh, we can build a great society. Oh, okay. Because they were hurting, coming out of the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow. Within 5 years after Dr. King's death, Roe v. Wade is national law. Now they're aborting 60% of children in some cities. And their out-of-wedlock birth rate is at 72%. Oh, no, we need Urban Family Talk. So I hope you'll share-a-thon with us, 888-779-1122, so we can keep bringing this information inside the Beltway with Star Parker. Well, you're inside the Beltway with Star Parker here on Urban Family Talk. You can tweet me at Star Parker, Facebook me at Star Parker for Freedom, or visit me at urbancure.org. The American Family Radio is in their share-a-thon this week, and so I thought I would tell you a little bit about what that means. They are our syndication. They are the ones that are working very, very closely to say American Family Radio is committed to make sure that you have Urban Family Talk. We got to get into these communities. People need representation there. They need information there. Those that already agree with us on Scripture. Those that are begging God to make sense of this. Those that know that 50 years of political promise coming from the left has not worked. And then they don't hear much information from the other side. Americans just reelected a president who opposed the Supreme Court decision banning partial birth abortion. And now they're getting a reality into what that means through Kermit Gosnell in Philadelphia being on trial now for murder of a woman and 8 babies that they born alive that he severed. That's partial birth abortion. The president agrees with everything Gosnell was doing in that clinic. No regulation. They don't want abortion clinics regulated. Filthy environment. Body parts in the freezer and on the wall from babies that he had aborted. His family's working there. They're making rich and getting fat off the dollars that they're making through abortion. It's sick. But America just reelected a president, the leader of our nation, thinks it should be legal in America to kill a live, fully formed infant. What does that say about America? What does that say about our future? We are in a national crisis. And its character, its values. And what Urban Family Talk does is gives us an opportunity to talk about these things in a very deep manner so we can share ideas on how we're going to reverse this trend. So you can join our share-a-thon. We're sharing with American Family Radio at 888-779-1122. And I tell you, I got these little tweets out there and little comments are coming in. I have one letter he's referring to my opening, talking about the letter I received from the college professor who says these students today, they're on federal financial aid. Even that understanding is warped. Parents should provide for their children's education. And people say, well, I don't have a way to do that. Well, there's a way to do that. It's called work. We don't even make our children work anymore. It's one of the reasons we have such a problem with illegal immigration now. Things that 12-year-olds used to do, babysit, clean the house, mow the lawn. We used to make our youth do this. Families would go mow the lawn. Everything that dad doesn't want to do, he'd make his 12-year-old son do. Everything mama didn't want to do, she'd make her 12-year-old kids do. Some at 9. Start distributing the responsibilities around the house. Telling 2-year-olds, pick up your toys. But we don't even want to do that anymore. We don't even want to pick up after ourselves anymore. And so we don't have any ability for them to have any kind of money that they might even save a little bit themselves. And we don't think investing in their colleges is important enough to go in our bank accounts or go on to get a loan. We'll get a loan on our homes to build an addition to the home so the neighbors would say, wow, you built an addition. We'll get a loan on our homes to put a pool in the backyard. Wow, you got a pool? But we won't get a loan to invest in our children's education. So the government went into competing with the private sector on federal aid, loans. And so all our kids are now on financial aid. And as the professor pointed out, they would rather spend their own money on tattoos and cell phones, but they're not about to buy a book until the financial aid check comes in. So now the financial aid check is late, so they're behind on their studies already. And I don't have it in front of me right now at the top of my head, but I know that it's certainly disproportionately high to certain communities of people, but it's certainly disproportionately high to what we used to see when people would go to college and graduate, that they don't even bother to graduate anymore. We have people that go to 2 and 3 years of college, getting their little financial aid, getting all behind, getting into their little parties, and then they just drop out. And because colleges are limited in their space, and this whole demand that everyone's child deserves to go to college, they have a right. They have limited space, even more. High demand, limited supply, prices skyrocket, and no one's concerned about it because they're not paying a bill. Why should I care whether the university prices are now skyrocketed? Why should the university care when they know that the government's picking up the tab for the students and all of their research? We are a nation in crises. And it's character, it's values. Because when people don't care, when people don't have deep moral roots, that they don't know God or believe in God. I was thinking the other day just about all these folks that then they kill themselves after they've killed others. There's no fear of God. More people didn't commit suicide because they were afraid to meet their maker. Now we don't believe in a maker, so real quick to just go kill themselves. And when you have people that don't have a deep moral framework, yeah, they'll do anything they can to get on top. Corrupting everything, and every institution now is corrupted, and the foundations are destroyed. And so American Family Radio, Urban Family Talk, gives us a place to say, what are we to do? Anyway, so I was saying that, I'm getting these little responses. So someone wrote me, said that it's disturbing to hear that they're willing to spend their own money on tattoo and cell phone, but they can't buy books for class until the now ends in. It says Fit Center say the same thing. These people have money for tattoos, piercings, tanning salons, but they can't afford the weekly gym membership. The patient is sick. Obesity is a very serious problem in the country. Then he said, did you know that police cars and ambulances have had to be retrofitted to accommodate the obese? So we've had to build bigger police cars and ambulances to accommodate the obese. And yet we now have Obamacare that says you don't even have to think about it. Your health care is not your business. It's our business. It's the government's business. We're going to take over 1/6 of the economy to ensure that you don't think about yourself. How dare anyone tell you that you have a responsibility to take care of yourself, to think about what you eat before you eat it, think about what you eat before you drink it, to think about walking and exercise. We pretend we even care about our relatives. I'm spending a lot more time now thinking about a whole lot now. Because I let the guard down for a while. I'm like, what, forget it. Once you cross 50, who wants to think about that anymore? And I thought, wait a minute. I don't want him to have a sick grandma. And then I have my little new girl, little grand girl, Miss Naomi. Oh, so cute. Just turned 1 little years old. Well, in 10 years, she's only going to be 10 years old, 11 years old. And in 10 years, I'm going to be 66 years old. I better be in fit. That's not a right sentence. I better be fit. I better be in shape. Because when she's 11 years old, she's going to want to do a whole lot of little 11-year-old things. And grandmommy wants to be able to do those with her. When she goes outside to run and play, I want to go run and play too. When she wants to go walking through the mall, I want to go walking through the mall too. But we've decided we don't have to think about these things. It's not our responsibility anymore. There are too many people that are ignoring the crises in character and values. There are too many now that think that these things are just fiscal matters. Even in the opposition party, even in the secular of the right, if you will, what we might call conservatives. They think that if we just have a better tax system, then it doesn't matter that we have a country of single mothers, sexually confused men, and abortion and euthanasia on demand. But ignoring these things will be an end to our country. Ignoring these things will leave people in misery. I mean, one sad part of life is to go into these nursing homes where people are alone. And they're a little family, because they're secular, they don't think it's important to come even to visit them. And they're old, and they're aging, and they're sickly. And it's sad. We should be engaged. We need to be engaged. You know, people think that the fight against Obamacare was only about the president. You guys are calling him a socialist. Why would you do that? They think it's only about the fiscal concerns. Well, he was taking over a major part of the society that is and should be in the private sector. And we do have examples of one size fits all not working. With Medicaid, we can look at Medicaid. That's a big government program. It's the only government program. It's a poverty program. And we can look at the lives of those that are in Medicaid and see misery. And we can look into their communities and not see specialists. And some people think that those were the only motivators or that the Tea Party showed up in Washington, D.C. to denounce Obamacare and beg their politicians not to vote for that horrible piece of legislation for self-interest, that they like the way that they already have their system, that they like their doctor, and they didn't want anyone to interject in that. And that's true. All of this is true. But also it's true that we're concerned about the people who have turned their lives over to somebody else to manage, the people that believe the political promise that somebody else can take care of you better than you can take care of yourself. And we allow them to manipulate law, enforce law on all of us. That just opens up the door for more irresponsibility.
Beautiful. We're trying to keep it that way.
And when we look at the obesity rates in these poor communities, they're off the chart.
And I'm Star Parker.
And we look at what happens when you don't take care of yourself to that individual, how it slows their lives down.
My goodness.
How it complicates and makes other problems in their lives, from not just heart attack, but my goodness, high blood pressure.
Participants in our great society.
And next thing you know, you're on dialysis.
We're bringing you inside the Beltway, right here in Washington, D.C.
So we want to be concerned. We want people to live right. And the only way that you're going to be able to overcome is to limit the role of government, to overcome all of these insistence that you don't have to engage your life. You have to limit government so that people will have to engage their own lives.
What will the righteous do? And there's
they won't get in the fitness center either. They do, but have money for the tattoo, have money for the piercing, have money for the tanning salon. But why would anyone want to go to the gym?
Entitlement programs.
And the government says you don't have to do anything. You can sit on your couch all day, every day, and we'll take care of all your health needs. We'll feed your children at school. And now we're going to try to figure out how come we've been feeding your children food that's just made them much more obese. And so we're going to take the soda machines out, but we're still going to give them processed food every day. We're not going to let you engage in it and make sure that they send some lunch. That's appropriate.
How did that happen? So that we can move ourselves to.
Some parents are having to deal with school environments to where the school doesn't want them to send lunch with their children anymore because it's making somebody else feel bad. That you brought a nice healthy lunch and you need to get into our lunch program. So everybody's exactly the same. All children are all ours, and we have to treat them all equally, and they all get exactly the same thing. We know that that's not
for mankind. And
correct.
There's peace in that organization.
God gives gifts and talents. He made every one of us unique.
Now in our sexual revolution and a war
just fascinating sometimes to get into these discussions. And I'm telling you, it's very difficult to get in these discussions because they're everywhere. It's everywhere. The foundations have been destroyed. So the question on the table is, what do we do? What does the righteous do? What do we do? Well, I tell you one thing we can do.
environment.
We can
I think
support
one of the
American
ways
Family
that we
Radio.
live that Christian life is to
We can make sure
engage
that
in
we
public
get
policy so
in the
that when we go
mainstream
outside of our
voices
personal
of
space,
alternative,
there's safety and peace in
voices
that
of
environment.
biblical
When
worldview.
righteous men rule, people are at
Because
peace.
American Family
And so we wanna
Radio,
make
the
sure that we
more
have
they
people
have, the
here in
more they can
Washington that are
syndicate
at
Urban
least a little
Family Talk.
righteous. We have opportunity
So that we
to
can push this
vote.
now,
You know,
not
if
just
you
in the
wanna
general
like me,
population,
and you
but
wanna
with
be
a
involved
specific
in our
emphasis
discussion, I'm only on
on our
hour
most
a day, but
hard-hit
it'll go viral,
communities.
and you can always catch up
And
with
that the
me.
people that love
But,
God in those
if you want to
communities,
like me on Facebook,
the people of
you can go to
ethnicity and minorities
Facebook.com,
in this
Star Parker
country
for Freedom. If you want to
that
Twitter me, then you just
open
Twitter
the
at
scriptures
Star
on
Parker,
Sunday
or
and
sign up for
believe
our
what it
newsletter
says,
at
that they'll have a place to go to get
I run the
news,
Center for Urban
to
Renewal
get
and
more
Education here in
information, to
Washington,
get insight.
D.C. We're a policy think tank where we talk about traditional values.
Someone else wrote
We
me a little
promote
letter. He
these
says, I
ideas,
kind of
traditional
I have to
values, limited
disagree with
government,
you.
free
Where you
market,
say the patient's
strong
sick.
national allegiance and defense.
That's what
And we want
Democrats
you to
do.
do that with us, and that's
No,
what this
the
show
Democrats
is all
don't
about.
deny the
It's
patient's sick.
sponsored by
They
Cure.
deny
It's
that
on
the
Urban
patient
Family
is
Talk,
responsible for their sickness.
radio, and I'm looking forward to
They
enjoying
say
a lot of time with you. I
you're
think
sick
right
because
now we'll be
someone
doing
else made
Tuesday,
you
Wednesday,
that way.
Thursday, and I'll build out and see if we can do it every day.
Well,
But I
that
really
is true.
appreciate that you're
And we
with
could
me
talk about
today,
this too.
and that you will
When
get
I
some
said
of your
that,
friends
though,
to be with us
originally,
as well.
I meant
Because we
as
are
a
looking
nation.
at this cultural war.
Because we are
I
a
was talking
nation in
yesterday
crisis.
about how we are a split nation.
But I
We're a
think that this
nation,
crisis can be solved.
right at
Dedicated
a
my
similar
life to
point
attempting
where
to solve
Abraham
it.
Lincoln was when he
We can
looked into the
reverse these
scriptures
trends,
in
but we need
1850 and
places
said,
go
"House
to
divided
get
against itself
information
can't stand."
so that we'll
And
know
we
what to
can't
do.
do this anymore. We
American
can't be half
Family
free
Radio
and
is one of
half
those
slave.
places.
We've got to make some decisions
888-779-1122.
on how we're gonna unify ourselves as a people.
Star
You know,
Parker
in
Inside the
thinking
Beltway
about
here
the
on
news out of
American
even the
on Urban
Republican
Family
Party,
Talk.
which is supposed to be the opposition
Urban
party,
Family
that they
Talk
cannot
is for you
determine,
to get
be
information
the
and
party
insight.
of Lincoln, who says,
And I'll be
no,
back here
we've
tomorrow.
got
Tweet
to
me, Star
set
Parker.
boundaries over our existence.
Follow me on
We've got
Facebook,
to
Star
have
Parker
laws that are
Freedom.
consistent with the scripture, and we as a nation are moving away from that, and in the political process having trouble finding an opposition party that agrees with itself that we need to fight on the other side, the liberals who've engaged us in a